Hey everyone, so we are on video 3 of my little cancer journey series. So the last video was just kind of talking about positivity and getting your finances in order before you start treatments, because once you get into your treatments, you might not have time, you might not feel like it. Um, but anyway, this video is going to be talking about my treatment plan, chemotherapy, radiation, which I actually ended up not needing, and surgery. Well, surgery will be a next video, but this is everything leading up to my 3 surgeries that I had. So just as a recap, I was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer that had spread to my liver. So there was a rectal tumor and there was a liver tumor. And I was diagnosed, and very, very quickly after, I was sent in for MRI, which they just got a better picture of everything. And then about, I'd say a week, once I got diagnosed, once I got that MRI and all the scans and all those results in, everything happens super, super quick. So I was mentioning before about the healthcare system in Canada being universal and not paying for everything. And, just it may have its problems, but when you have a serious life-threatening problem, disease, illness, they are on it. Like, I got swept into the system so fast. I think it was maybe a week later, I had already had my first chemotherapy session ready to go. I had had my oncologist set up. I had my appointment with her. Like, it just all happened all really quick. Um, so my chemotherapy regime was full Fox. So I don't expect anyone to know all of this. There's so many, like 3 or 4, sorry, there's like 6 or 7 different cancer drug regimes that you can be on. It's different for everyone. It's different for your cancer, for the type of cancer, for the stage of your cancer. There's so many factors that determine which chemotherapy you'll be on. So I'm not going to kind of say, oh, this is what you will go through if you have the same cancer that I had. But for me, I was on a full Fox regime, which is 2 drugs. There's oxaliplatin, which was 2 hours. Like, it took 2 hours to administer at the hospital. They hook you up to the machines and stuff. I got some pictures here. And there's another, it's not a drug, or it's something, it's basically like some fluids that they give you to make the second chemo drug work better, which I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's shortened to 5-FU. And that one, they would hook up to my PIC line, and I would take that home with me after my 2 hours at the chemo ward, which for me, I went to RVH at Barrie. Amazing facility, amazing nurses. Every time you go there, you just feel like you're the only person that which you are, like you're one of very few people that the nurse is looking after. So, mind you, it is a very busy place. It's very eye-opening. Every time I go there, I'm just like, wow, I can't believe how many people are here, like just getting chemo. It's like every day you go, it's somebody else's first day. Every day you go, there's somebody else on their last day. And yeah, they've got that place scheduled pretty tightly. Um, so anyway, yeah, so I would go in, I would do my 2 hours with the oxaliplatin, and then the the one that I took home, the 5-FU, that would stay attached to my PIC line for 46 hours. So it was like a slow drip, and it was actually controlled by your body heat, which is interesting. So there was a little device on the end of the chemo bottle that they would put onto your skin. And then that skin contact, the heat from your body would regulate how quickly it went in. So you had to make sure that for those 2 days, you weren't being overly active and you weren't excessively cold. You kind of had to stay neutral temperature wise, because if you got really hot and your body temperature rose, it would go in faster, which would make you feel sick. If you were too cold, it would slow the flow of the drug and it wouldn't be done in the 46 hours. So it was kind of a, you just go home and just kind of relax for 2 days. There's not really much you can do with a bottle of chemo hanging off of you anyway. But but yeah, so that was my every 2 weeks I would go in and I would have this. So the PIC line, I mentioned it a couple of times now. So it's basically just it's a line that they would put in. Like you can see, there's this little dot on my arm here. It's been taken out now, but it was just like a catheter basically that they put into your vein, and it gets fed all the way down into your heart. There's also a port which they can put in your chest that goes right in. But the purpose of this is because, well, for me, because I had that bottle that I had to take home that dripped slowly for 2 days, they have to have that going in a PIC line. They can't leave an IV in your hand. But basically, it also prevents your veins from getting damaged because, chemotherapy drugs, they're very harsh chemicals going into your body. And if you're constantly having an IV into a vein, those veins are a lot smaller, they're a lot thinner, and it can eventually cause those veins to get weakened and kind of collapse. So they would have to always find like a new spot or a new vein. But with the PIC line, it's going right in essentially into your heart, where the arteries there are quite big. So when the drug goes in, it's diluted super quick. And then it doesn't have any of those issues that you could have with going into your vein. Sorry, I just realized I had like foaming at the mouth here. But yeah, so the PIC line was great because it also meant that whenever I had to do any blood work at RVH or go for CT scans or anything, they could just take it right from that. Although you do go for blood work before every chemotherapy just to check your blood levels. And I did that in Bracebridge. So I didn't drive all the way to Barrie for that. So because I was going to Bracebridge, they're not set up for chemo. So they don't, so when I had to get jabbed every time to draw blood, which was fine. I got over that pretty quick. Before all this started, even just getting an IV put in would make me feel woozy and faint, and just like but afterwards you get poked and prodded so many times with cancer. Like you can stick an IV in me and I'm totally fine. It doesn't affect me anymore. But anyway, what was I talking about? I was talking about my my chemo regime. So the FOLFOX. So one of the things about chemo that everyone thinks is the side effects. And I have to say, I was very pleasantly surprised at how not horrible it was. It was not great, don't get me wrong, but growing up, every time you see chemotherapy in movies, on TV, in media, it seems like they always show you the worst. And maybe 20 years ago, that's what it was like, but you just imagine laying in bed, unable to move, throwing up, feeling nauseous constantly, lost all your hair, weak, losing weight. And for some people, yes, this very well could be your experience. But again, I think that depends on many factors like your age, your physical activity, your health, your eating habits. Like there's a lot of things that can make the chemo better or worse. So I would highly recommend you just do what your doctors tell you to. They know what they're doing. When they say, don't eat this, try to eat more of this, get some exercise, don't sit around all day, take the pills when you are having just do it, because that's there to make your experience with it better. I was already healthy. I already ate basically everything they told me about what I should be doing with my lifestyle. I was already doing. So the nurse actually was joking. She's like, I don't even need to tell you anything because you're already doing everything that you should be doing. So for me, I didn't have to change too much. But for some people, I'm sure that maybe you're not as physically active. Maybe you do eat pretty poorly. Maybe you're not getting, the amount of hydration a day that you should be getting. So some of these changes would be really tough, to stop eating certain foods or to eat more of other foods. Like it can be hard for people to adjust. But for me, it was very easy because, like I said, I was already a pretty healthy guy. So the side effects as well, because of that, weren't that bad for me, at least at the beginning. So the first, I'd say 2 or 3 chemo sessions were almost like nothing. Like I'm at home thinking to myself, really, this is it? This is not bad at all. But with the oxaliplatin, a lot of those side effects, they're cumulative. So the more you get that drug, the more the side effect starts to affect you. And the main one with oxaliplatin or oxy or oxali or whatever is neuropathy. So I would say out of all the side effects that I had, neuropathy was by far the worst. And so what that is that it affects your nerves in your fingers and your toes and in your throat. And it's like an extreme sensitivity to the cold. So how that affected me was, and again, it got worse and worse. So for the first couple of chemo sessions, it maybe I would only have this for a couple of hours, half the day. By session 3, it was maybe for the whole day. By session 4, it was like 3 or 4 days. By session 7, though, which is where we stopped for surgery, it was constant, like all week, all 2 weeks even, to some degree. But it's like anything you touch that was cold, and I'm saying like cold, but like refrigerator cold, or you know room temperature liquids even was too cold. But swallowing anything that was cold was like swallowing razor blades. So everything I ate, everything I drank had to be warm or hot. So mix that with also needing to be drinking 2 to 3 liters of fluid while you're on the chemo to help flush it through your system. That made it really difficult when everything had to be warm, because I mean, I'm like a room temperature water drinker, but when room temperature is too cold and you have to heat that water up in the microwave or and have like hot water from a kettle, that's tough to drink 2 liters of water every day that's hot. So I always got around it by kind of getting creative. So for one, in the morning, I would have my little French press of coffee, decaf, because caffeinated coffee dehydrates you. So that doesn't count. And it makes you, like it's a diuretic, so you pee a lot more. And so you're not retaining as much fluid. So if you're going to be drinking coffee while on chemo, you should be drinking decaf, which the nurses would tell you that anyway. So that was about 1 liter in the morning that I would have of decaf coffee. So that's 1 liter of the day gone in that first couple of hours. Broth was fine, like a clear broth, like chicken broth or vegetable broth. Really brothy soups, I would have like extra broth in that or extra water in that, or Mr. Noodles, because they're hot, but then also mostly water. That would also get me through another, half to 1 liter of liquids a day. Another thing I would do is like hot water and then put in like a third of the mug full of like cranberry juice or something, and it was like a nice flavorful tea, or just drink some tea that's not caffeinated. Hot chocolate was another good one. But eventually, day after day after day, month after month of this, everything just starts tasting gross. For me, I noticed, going into these treatments, I call it, it's like my mouth was dead. Like inside my mouth was dead. Everything felt gross, tasted gross. Flavors were just not that great. And just everything being warm, it was just gross all around. But I mean, if that was the worst of it, then I don't really have a whole lot to complain about. The other neuropathy part was like to touch, like grabbing things that are cold out of the fridge, out of the freezer. It felt like you were getting burned, but cold. Like you touch it and it would just be like, oh, that's like way too cold. And like the tingling in your fingers, the numbness in your fingers, that just got really annoying too. So for me, I still have it. Like I've been off chemo for a couple of months now, 12 cycles of chemo, and it can be permanent. Like it can have permanent damage. So I'm still recovering from that. Like my fingertips are still kind of numb. And we stopped mine a couple of treatments before the end, like this one drug. But I'll get to that in a later video. So anyway, yeah, so the side effects for me were not terrible, but they weren't great. And then there's of course the nausea. I never threw up. I never threw up once. Maybe it's just because of my health, because of my eating habits, because of my allowing myself to recover. But thankfully, I never threw up once the entire time I was on chemo for like 6 months. But I did feel nauseous quite often, and so I would just take the anti-nausea pills that they gave me. I had diarrhea sometimes, but then I would just take the Imodium as directed, which helped get rid of that when it was happening. Because diarrhea, you're just getting rid of all those fluids. So when you have diarrhea on chemo, you need to drink even more to replenish those fluids, and you need to be drinking electrolytes and getting those nutrients back in, because diarrhea just drains your body of all of those nutrients and all that liquid. So there's a lot of things to kind of keep on top of. But yeah, as for side effects that are common, like hair loss, as you can see, I didn't lose my hair. It got thinned out quite a bit, but I still have all my hair, which is good. But anyway, so I think, well, I guess the blood test, I kind of talked about the blood test a little bit. One of the things actually, yeah, I mentioned in my last video about like not having to pay for anything and all my drugs being covered. But because of your constant tracking of your blood counts, like your platelets, your red blood cell or your white blood cell counts, your white blood cells are basically what run your immune system. So, and they're created in your bones, in your bone marrow, which I found that surprising. I don't know why I never knew that. But so when my white blood cell counts started getting really low after like the second or third cycle of chemo, I had to start getting these Lapelga injections. And it's just this little tiny amount of drug. But those injections, I didn't have to pay for them because they were part of the paramed services that were looking after my PICC line. But they cost like $616. Sorry, $1,660. So yes, almost $1,700 a shot. And I got those every 2 weeks for about, what was it, 10 chemo cycles. So you can imagine how much that would have cost if I didn't have that covered. But anyway, yeah, so the blood tests happen every 2 weeks before my next chemo session, and that determined whether or not I could continue receiving more chemo. So I never had to pause chemo at all. My blood counts, we were able to manage the levels of everything and get them up. And then your weight. I didn't actually lose a lot of weight when I was on chemo. That's another thing that people always worry about. But I just made sure that I ate a lot when I was on chemo. Some people, they can't. They just throw it up. I was lucky in that I was able to just eat almost normally. I made sure that I was eating healthy, that I was eating constantly. I actually, at one point, started putting on a little bit of weight when I was doing chemo, which was amazing because I'm already skinny enough as is. But yeah, so I guess that kind of covers my experience with chemotherapy. You know, it wasn't until like round 5, 6, 7 that I was kind of just lying around in bed all day for all week, that week of chemo. I had to go in to get the bottle removed, to disconnect 2 days after the chemo session started. But that's usually then when I would start feeling kind of crappy and be in bed for days and days. But again, I made sure that I got up and I tried to be as active as I could. I actually got a gym membership while I was on chemo, just to give myself an excuse to leave the house and go do something and, you know, kind of work out a little bit, you know, run on a treadmill for a while, do some, you know, Stairmaster, whatever just to kind of get yourself active and moving and get your blood flowing and just to get out. And, you know, it gets kind of boring. I'm in the middle of nowhere here by myself all day long. So it was nice to get out and just be around some people and, you know, just stay a little bit active. And I would always treat myself to something delicious because, you know, I would go to the gym when I started feeling better after the chemo, and then I would go and buy myself like, you know, just go and buy myself some lunch somewhere. And it was like a little reward for getting through another round of chemo. But anyway, that is it for this video. Hopefully this is kind of helpful just so you can maybe realize that chemo is not always that scary. But again, every single person is going to have a different experience with chemo. Even when you're in the chemo ward and you're watching other people and you're hearing them talk, everyone goes through a little bit different, even though everyone's kind of going through the same thing. But anyway, yeah. So that's my experience with the first 7 chemo cycles. At that point, it was determined after some tests, CT scans, and everything, that we could pause the chemo and go into surgery, which is what I'm going to talk about in my next video. Is my 3 surgeries that I had. There was the surgery in my bowels, the lower anterior resection where they cut out a chunk of my rectum and sewed it back together. And then the liver surgery where they cut a chunk of my liver off to get rid of that tumor. And then the ostomy, because I had an ileostomy put in. So all 3 surgeries were done at the same time. So I'm going to talk about that and my hospital stay in my next video. So thanks for watching if you're still watching this far into it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day, guys.